So we're constantly seeing this global push towards education for everyone, right? You look at big agreements like the UN's Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities from way back in 2006, and then the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015.
Yeah.
Both have this really clear aim of inclusive education. But, well, what's on paper and what actually happens when the classroom door closes sometimes feels like two totally different things.
Absolutely. I mean, the idea itself that every child, regardless of their individual needs, should learn together. It's powerful, really powerful.
It is.
But the real test, isn't it, is how equipped and, frankly, how willing teachers are to make that a reality day in and day out.
Right.
And that's where their personal beliefs, their mindset becomes absolutely crucial.
Exactly. Because ultimately the success of inclusive education, well, it really boils down to the teachers, doesn't it? Their thoughts, their feelings, their confidence in their own abilities.
Those are the drivers.
Yeah, these are the driving forces behind their teaching practices and how receptive they are to making inclusion work. And that's precisely what we're digging into today.
Good.
We've got this incredibly comprehensive meta-analysis. It's like a bird's eye view, pulling together over 100 research studies.
Wow.
From 40 different countries spanning 2 decades, 2000 to 2020. We're talking about the perspectives of more than 40,000 teachers.
That's a massive data set. And what's so valuable about this research, I think, is its depth. It doesn't just ask, do teachers like inclusion? Yes or no?
Right. It's more nuanced.
Much more. It really breaks down their beliefs into different components. First, their cognitive appraisals, basically, what they actually think about inclusion. Is it feasible? Is it beneficial?
Yeah, okay.
Then their emotional appraisals, how they feel about it, things like their stress levels, maybe anxiety, or even enthusiasm.
Their gut reaction almost.
Sort of, yeah. And finally, there's self-efficacy, which is really their belief in their own capability to actually teach effectively in an inclusive setting.
Well, some dough attitude.
Exactly, their agency. Can they make it work? Do they believe they can make it work?
So for you tuning in, our goal with this deep dive is basically to take this mountain of research and give you the key insights, the actionable stuff. We want to give you a real understanding of what's happening with teachers' beliefs about inclusive education worldwide, maybe highlight some surprising findings, and provide some clarity without drowning you in data points.
Yeah, cut through the noise a bit. So, our mission, if you like, for this deep dive is to tackle some key questions. First off, what's the overall picture? Globally, where do teachers stand on inclusive education? Positive, negative, somewhere in between.
Good question.
Then we'll explore how these beliefs might differ depending on where a teacher is in their career. Do newbies see things differently from veterans?
That's interesting.
We'll also look into whether there's a difference between teachers trained specifically in special education versus those in regular ed classrooms. And finally, maybe most importantly, what kind of training, what kind of support actually makes a positive difference? Can we shift these beliefs?
All right, let's dive right into that big picture then. What did this massive study actually tell us about what teachers are generally thinking and feeling about inclusion?
Okay, so the headline finding from the meta-analysis was that when you average it all out across all those teachers, all those studies, their cognitive appraisals, their emotional appraisals, and their self-efficacy, they all fell into the mid-range of the measurement scales they used.
Mid-range. Okay.
Yeah.
So what does that actually mean in practical terms, this middle ground? It's not like they're super enthusiastic, jumping up and down for inclusion.
Right.
But they're not slamming the door on it either.
Exactly that. This neutral stance, or maybe lukewarm is another way to think about it, is a really crucial insight.
Why crucial?
Well, it suggests that while teachers aren't necessarily rejecting the idea of inclusion outright, they also might not be fully convinced of its benefits. Or maybe they're not entirely confident in their ability to pull it off effectively.
Okay, I see.
And that has potential consequences, right, for the students. Because if teachers aren't wholeheartedly on board, maybe the implementation of inclusive practices could end up being a bit inconsistent or...
Half-hearted.
Yeah, exactly. Half-hearted, not fully realized.
Okay, to make this mid-range thing more concrete,
Yeah.
can you give us some examples? Like, what kind of statements were teachers responding to in these surveys? What does a mid-range answer actually look like?
Sure. So let's take cognitive appraisals, their thoughts, their attitudes. A scale like the 80s, the Attitudes Toward Inclusive Education scale, might have an item like, students who cannot control their behavior and disrupt activities should be in regular classes.
Okay.
A mid-range score there would mean they neither strongly agree nor strongly disagree. It signals maybe uncertainty or mixed feelings about whether that's appropriate or feasible.
Right, they're on the fence.
Pretty much. Then for emotional appraisals, feelings, concerns, something like the concerns about inclusive education scale might say. I am concerned that I will be more stressed if I have students with disabilities in my class.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a mid-range answer suggests some level of worry, some hesitation, but maybe not overwhelming dread.
Okay. And self-efficacy,
Mm.
their confidence.
Right. So the teacher efficacy for inclusive practice scale might have statements like, I am confident in designing learning tasks so that the individual needs of students with disabilities are accommodated.
Uh-huh.
A mid-range response here implies they feel, well, somewhat capable, but perhaps not entirely secure. Maybe they feel they can do it for some students or under some conditions, but not universally confident.
So yeah, it really paints a picture of teachers being maybe a bit cautious, a bit unsure about the demands.
Yeah.
It definitely flags up that there's a big opportunity here to, cultivate more positive and confident beliefs.
Definitely. Huge potential for development.
Okay, now let's pivot a bit. How do these beliefs stack up depending on where a teacher is in their career? Did the study find differences between teachers still training the pre-service folks and those already in the classroom, the in-service teachers?
Yes. This is where we saw a really interesting split. The study found a notable difference, a significant one actually, in self-efficacy beliefs between these two groups.
Okay, how's that?
Pre-service teachers reported significantly higher levels of self-efficacy. Their average score was around 3.69 compared to just 3.13 for the in-service teachers on the same scale.
Wow, that's quite a drop in confidence.
Yeah.
Almost half a point on the scale. What the big difference is it like the student teachers are full of optimism and then reality bites?
That's very likely a big part of it, yeah. Pre-service teachers often come in with, let's say, a more idealistic viewpoint.
Sure.
It's shaped by their coursework, maybe limited, controlled experiences. They might overestimate their initial abilities to juggle everything in a diverse classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in-service teachers, they've been there. They have a much more practical, boots-on-the-ground understanding of the challenges.
Hit day-to-day grind.
Exactly. The wide range of student needs, the time pressures, the resource limitations, sometimes the lack of support. This real-world experience seems to lead to a more realistic and often, a lower assessment of their own efficacy.
That makes total sense. Theory versus practice.
Mm.
But what about their actual thoughts and feelings about inclusion itself? The cognitive and emotional side, did they find differences there too?
Well, this is where it gets even more interesting. The meta-analysis didn't find any significant differences in cognitive or emotional appraisals between the pre-service and in-service groups.
Really? That's surprising.
It is a bit, isn't it? Both groups, on average, held pretty similar neutral views on, the feasibility and desirability of inclusion, and they reported similar levels of concern or anxiety about it.
Huh. I might have expected in-service teachers, facing the daily challenges, might have developed stronger opinions, maybe even more negative ones, about the whole idea or the stress involved.
You might think so. But it seems, at least on average across this huge sample, that while the day-to-day classroom experience definitely impacts their confidence, their self-efficacy, it doesn't necessarily fundamentally change their underlying attitudes or feelings about the core principle of inclusive education.
Okay, so career stage seems to mostly hit the confidence factor. Now, what about training background? Did the study look at teachers who had specific training in special education versus those without it? Any differences there?
Yes, and this was another really key finding. Teachers who did have specialized training in special education held significantly more positive cognitive appraisals about inclusion compared to their colleagues in regular education.
Oh.
The study quantified this difference using something called Cohen's d, and it came out at 0.41. That's generally considered a moderate effect size, definitely meaningful.
So having that specific special ed training makes teachers view the whole idea, the practicality of inclusion, more favorably.
That feels pretty logical, right? They've likely got more tools in their toolbox, a deeper understanding.
Precisely. It really underscores the vital role that specific targeted training plays. It shapes a teacher's perspective on whether inclusion is actually feasible and beneficial. It implies that just, believing in the general idea of inclusion might not be enough. Teachers need the specific know-how that comes with specialized training to really buy into it cognitively.
So the how matters as much as the why.
Definitely. Interestingly, though, this study didn't find significant differences in emotional appraisals or self-efficacy between these two groups based on training type alone. But that difference in cognitive appraisal, how they think about it, is quite telling.
It really does highlight the power of that specialized knowledge. Okay, now the study also looked specifically at training programs and interventions designed to promote inclusive education. What did it find there? Can we actually change teachers' beliefs through these efforts? Yes, and this is really encouraging news. The meta-analysis showed that, generally speaking, these kinds of training and interventions do lead to positive shifts right across the board.
Okay.
They found improvements in cognitive appraisals, thinking more positively about it, improvements in emotional appraisals, so less concern, less anxiety, and improvements in self-efficacy, feeling more capable.
Nice. Were the improvements significant?
Oh, yeah. The effect sizes were pretty notable. They were around D equals 0.63 for cognitive and emotional appraisals, and even larger for self-efficacy, up at D equals 0.93.
Wow, nearly a full standard deviation jump for self-efficacy. So it's definitely not a fixed mindset then. These beliefs can be positively influenced through focused effort. That's great news for anyone trying to promote inclusion.
Absolutely. It strongly suggests that teacher prep programs and, importantly, ongoing professional development can play a critical role. But the study didn't stop there. It also tried to dig deeper into which specific characteristics of these interventions were most effective, particularly for shifting those cognitive appraisals.
Right, like what kind of training really hits home? What makes teachers think differently about the value and practicality of inclusion? What sparks those aha moments?
Well, one of the most significant findings, maybe the most significant, was the impact of practical experience actually being in inclusive classrooms.
Right.
Interventions that included fieldwork, practicums, any kind of hands-on experience in real inclusive settings. They were significantly more effective in improving cognitive appraisals compared to interventions that were purely theoretical or didn't have that practical piece.
That makes so much sense. Seeing is believing, right?
Yeah.
Actually being there, watching it work, maybe trying things out. That probably breaks down a lot of doubts or abstract fears.
Exactly. It gives them a real-world context, allows teachers to see the benefits firsthand, maybe learn from experienced colleagues who are making it work, and crucially, build their own sense of competence by doing it. It makes the feasibility much more tangible.
Yeah, takes it out of the textbook and into the classroom.
Precisely. But there were a couple of surprising findings as well, related to other intervention aspects.
Oh, really? Go on. What didn't work as expected?
Well, contrary to what the researchers hypothesized, interventions that included just general contact with people with special educational needs, but not necessarily within a school or classroom setting, did not show a significant boost to cognitive appraisals about inclusive education.
Huh. That is unexpected. You'd think just fostering positive interactions, reducing unfamiliarity in any context would help shift attitudes overall.
You would think so. But the researchers speculate that the context might be really key here. General positive interactions are great, of course, but they might not directly address the specific worries or questions teachers have about managing learning and behavior within the classroom.
Ah, I see. So the experience needs to be relevant to the actual job of teaching in that setting.
That seems to be the implication. It needs to be situated within the educational environment to really shift those beliefs about its feasibility and desirability in that specific context.
That's a really sharp insight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what else? What about, say, the length of the training? Did longer, more intensive programs lead to bigger belief changes?
Again, surprisingly, no. The duration of the training, measured in hours, did not significantly moderate the effectiveness of interventions when it came to changing those cognitive appraisals.
That's fascinating. So a short, sharp workshop could potentially be just as effective as a semester-long course, depending on what's in it.
It seems so. It really suggests that it's not just about the quantity of time spent, but much more about the quality and the specific components of the training.
Like that practical classroom experience we just talked about.
Exactly. That seems to be a much bigger lever than just adding more hours of the same thing. Focus on the quality, the active ingredients, rather than just the dose.
Makes sense.
And one final point on this. The effectiveness of these interventions on cognitive appraisals didn't seem to differ significantly between pre-service and in-service teachers. Both groups appeared to benefit similarly from well-designed training.
Okay, so let's try and pull out the big takeaways here, it sounds like. One, on average, teachers globally are kind of sitting on the fence about inclusive education neutral views.
That mid-range finding.
Two, confidence is higher for those starting out, but takes a hit with real classroom experience.
Yeah, the efficacy drop.
Three, specialized training in special ed seems to foster more positive thinking about inclusion's feasibility.
Right, the cognitive appraisal difference.
And four, when it comes to training interventions to change beliefs, The magic ingredient seems to be practical, hands-on experience in actual inclusive classrooms.
That's the big one, yeah.
While just general contact with people with special needs, or even just the length of the training itself, doesn't seem to be the deciding factor for changing how teachers think about it.
That's a really excellent summary. It captures the key nuances. It really paints a picture of the complexity of teachers' beliefs, doesn't it? And it highlights that we need a really thoughtful approach to teacher education and professional development.
Yeah, it feels like we need to move beyond just saying inclusion is good and really focus on the how.
Precisely. Equipping teachers with concrete, practical experiences and effective strategies right there in the classroom context. That seems paramount.
So thinking about the implications, what does this mean for, say, university teacher training programs or for schools trying to support their current staff with inclusion?
Well, for the initial teacher training programs, it screams out the critical importance of embedding meaningful, well-supported practical experiences in diverse, inclusive classrooms.
Not just a quick observation tour.
No, definitely not.
Uh,
It needs to involve active participation, proper mentorship from skilled, inclusive educators, and crucially, structured time for reflection on those experiences, making sense of it all.
Okay. And for teachers already working, the in-service folks.
For professional development for in-service teachers, it emphasizes focusing on hands-on learning, sharing practical, proven strategies, maybe opportunities for peer coaching or observing colleagues, rather than just, sitting through theoretical lectures or long sessions without direct application.
Make it real, make it relevant.
Exactly, and remembering that finding about lower self-efficacy for in-service teachers, providing targeted support, good resources, maybe coaching, and importantly, creating opportunities for them to experience success in inclusive settings is absolutely vital for building that confidence back up.
Yeah, it really sounds like creating those opportunities for success, for practical application, and fostering that culture of shared learning and reflection among teachers. That could be the real key to shifting beliefs and making inclusive education truly successful for all students.
I think that's spot on. It's about empowerment. Giving teachers the tools and the confidence they need, not just telling them why it's a good idea.
So, for you listening to this deep dive, we've journeyed through the pretty complex landscape of teachers' beliefs about inclusive education. We've seen how these beliefs are shaped by things like training and experience. And while often those beliefs sit in that kind of neutral zone, the research gives us real hope. It clearly shows that targeted interventions, especially those grounding teachers in real-world classroom experience, hold significant promise for nurturing more positive, more confident, more efficacious beliefs.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to perhaps chew on after this. Consider how these findings about teacher beliefs, about the power of practical experience, about the confidence gap, how might these insights relate to implementing other kinds of educational reforms, or even any large-scale change initiative you might know, maybe in business or your community?
That's a great question.
What fundamental role do individual beliefs play when we try to make big changes happen? And based on what we've discussed, what strategies might be most effective in getting people genuinely on board, fostering that buy-in, and making sure changes actually stick?
Definitely something worth mulling over, way beyond just education. Look, this deep dive has hopefully given you a solid foundation based on this huge study. But as always, there's more to explore.
Always.
You might find it valuable to look into specific examples of teacher training programs that really nail that practical experience component. Or maybe dig into the research on the long-term impact. Do these belief changes actually translate into different classroom practices and, most importantly, better outcomes for all students down the line?
Crucial questions for future research.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.